In this next lesson, we're going to talk about common factors. Let's take a look at a definition for common factors. A common factor is a factor that two or more numbers have in common. Makes sense. The number 1 is always a common factor between numbers. This is important. We talked about in our last lesson how 1 is always a factor, so it makes sense that 1 is always going to be a common factor between two different numbers. Let's take a look at the numbers 6 and 8. The first thing we need to do before we can find common factors is figure out, well, what are the factors of those numbers? And then we're going to circle the factors that they have in common. So we need to make some lists. Let's go ahead and start with 1. We know that 1 is always going to be a factor along with the number itself. So for the number 6, 1 and 6 are factors. And for the number 8, 1 and 8 are factors. Then we move on and go through our numbers 1 through 10 and cross them off as we go. Now, because both of our numbers are less than 10, 9 and 10 cannot be factors of those numbers. And so we have 6 is a factor of 6, so we can cross 6 out. And then 8 is a factor of 8, and we can cross 8 out. And 7 is not a factor of 6 or 8, because I can't multiply 7 times anything. We can cross 7 out, and we just have a few more numbers to look at. So let's look at the number 2. Are our numbers even? Is 6 an even number and is 8 an even number? Well, 6, yes, 6 is an even number. So 2 times what gives me 6? 2 times 3. So 2 I have used for my 6. How about for 8? Is 8 an even number? Yes, 8 is an even number. So 2 times 4 gives me 8. So now I've used my 2. When I've gone to 6, I've used my 3. Is 3 a factor of 8? Can I multiply 8 times anything to get, or 3 times anything to get me 8? No. When I add up the sum of my digits, I'm just adding one digit up. So 8 is not divisible by 3, so 3 is not going to be a factor of 8, but it is a factor of the number 6. And then how about the number 4? Is 4 a factor of the number 6? Can I divide 6 evenly into 4 groups? I cannot, but 4 is a factor of 8, and I have that listed below. And then 5 is not a factor of either, because neither are 5 or 0. So here I have my factors for number 6. I have the factors of 1, 2, 3, and 6. And for my number 8, I have the factors of 1, 2, 4, and 8. When I have to find my common factors, I'm going to circle the numbers that they have in common. Now, right here, our statement says that the number 1 is always a common factor, so that's always something we're going to have on our list. And then what else did both of these numbers have in common? They both have the number 2 in common because they're both even. So when I'm listing my common factors, I have 1 and 2 as common factors between the numbers 6 and 8. All right, we have the numbers 12 and 18 here. What I'd like for you to do is find all of the factors of the numbers 12 and the numbers 18, and then identify what they have in common. Starting with my number 12, I know that 1 and 12 are going to be factors, so that's a factor pair. 12 is an even number, so 2 times what gives me 12? Well, 2 times 6. And then 3, is 3 a factor of 12? Well, to find if a number is divisible by 12, I add up its two digits and see if that's divisible by 12. So 1 plus 2 equals 3, and 3 is divisible by 3. So 3 is going to be a factor. 3 times 4 gives me 12. And because I have my consecutive numbers of 3 and 4, I'm done finding my factors of 12. So those are my 6 factors of 12. If I put them in order from least to greatest, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And again, my factors kind of make this rainbow effect. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. All right, let's look at our factors for the number 18. I have 1 and 18. 1 is always going to be a factor. How about 2? Is 18 an even number? Yes, it is. So 2 is a factor. 2 times what gives me 18? 2 times 9. Is 3 a factor of 18? In order to find that out, I add my digits together. So 1 plus 8 gives me 9. Is 9 going to be a number that's divisible by 3? Yes, it is. So 3 is a factor. 3 times what gives me 18? Well, 3 times 6. Is 4 a factor of 18? Can I multiply 4 times anything to get 18? I cannot. How about 5? I cannot. And then 6, well 6 I've already used, so because I've gotten to 6 and I've already used 6, I'm done finding my factors of 18. So I'm going to list those factors in order from least to greatest. I have 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18. And again, these numbers kind of make those rainbows when I connect them to their factor pairs. And then I'm going to circle my numbers that we have in common. So 1 is always going to be a common factor. 2, both of these numbers are even, so they both have the number 2 in common. They're both divisible by 3, so 3 is a common factor. And if they're both divisible by 3, then they're both going to be divisible by 6, because that's what my divisibility rule for 6 says. Do we see any other common factors between these numbers? We do not. So our common factors are 1, 2, 3, and 6. I want you to find the common factors, or I want you to find rather all of the factors of our number 30, 36, and 24, and then identify what do they have in common. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, here we have all of the factor pairs listed for 30, 36, and 24. And I want to find what do they have in common. Make sure you have all of these factor pairs listed for all of those numbers so that you can compare your work to my work. It's important for you to list all of the factors because sometimes you're going to have to know all of the factors of your numbers. Let's figure out what they have in common. Now the number 1 is always going to be a common factor between our numbers. So 1 can be listed. Are all of our numbers even? Yes, they are. So because all of our numbers are even, I see that 2 is a common factor between all of our numbers. Are all of our numbers divisible by 3? They are. If I add up the sum of their digits, the sum of all of these digits is going to be divisible by 3. So the number is going to be divisible by 3. And if my number is divisible by 2 and 3, it's also going to have a factor of 6. So here I have a common factor of 6. 4 is not a common factor. 5 is not a common factor. I have 10. I have 12 here, so 12 is a common factor between 36 and 24, but not between 30. So those are all of my common factors. I have 1, 2, 3, and 6 as common factors between 30, 36, and 24. And again, the first thing I needed to do was list all of my factor pairs, and then I can figure out what they have in common. Let's take a look at the next problem. I have 3 more numbers, 45, 32, and 18. I'd like you to find all of the factors of those 3 numbers, and then figure out what they have in common. Okay, here I have all of my factors for the number 45, 32, and 18. All of these numbers are composite numbers because they all have more than 2 factors. My prime numbers only have 2 factors. My composite numbers have more than 2 factors. So when I'm looking at what they have in common, they're always going to have the number 1 in common. And let me see if there's anything else that these numbers have in common. Well, 32 and 18 are both even, so they have 2 in common, but 45 is not even. 45 is divisible by 3, and so is 18, but 32 is not divisible by 3. So the only common factor that these 3 numbers have is the number 1. That's it. That's their only common factor. Again, it's important that we listed all of our factors between our numbers. We found everything that we can multiply times another number to get to our final product, which is our total that we're starting with. And then we look to see what they have in common. Let's take a look at one last problem. Here we have a word problem. Now these word problems are incredibly wordy, but really let's think about what they're asking us. Bella planted 40 blackberry plants, 25 strawberry plants, and 20 blueberry plants. So those are our totals. Think about them as our totals, or our products in multiplication, or our dividend in division. Only one type of plant will be planted in each row. All rows have the same number of plants. How many plants can Bella put in each row? So I want to know, if I have a multiplication problem, let's say I have 1 times 40 is going to give me 40. This means I would have one row with 40 plants in each row to give me my total of 40. I want to know, between all of these numbers, what can I have as this place? how many are in each row. And because I'm looking for one of the numbers that I'm multiplying times another number, I'm looking for their factors. So here I'm looking for common factors. There are a lot of words going on here, but the simple part of it is they just want me to find my common factors. That's it. They want to know how many can be planted in each row, and each row is going to be a piece of my multiplication, which means it's going to be a factor. So what are my common factors between 40, 25, and 20? Go ahead and find all of your factors and then find what they have in common. Okay, here are all of my factors for the number 40, 25, and 20. And what this means in terms of my problem is that I could have 1 in each row and have 40 rows, or 40 in each row and have 1 row, 2 in each row and have 20 rows, or 20 in each row and have 2 rows, 4 in each row and have 10 in each row, or 10 in each row and have 4 rows, or 5 in each row and have 8 rows, or 8 in each row and have 5 rows, so on and so forth for my other numbers. So I'm looking for how many plants can Bella plant in each row, which means I'm looking for a common factor. So let's look for our common factors between these numbers. 1 is always going to be a common factor, so I can place 1 down. Are all of these numbers even? They are not, so 2 is not going to be a common factor. All of these numbers are not divisible by 3. All of these numbers are not divisible by 4, but because all of these numbers end with a 0 or a 5, they're all going to be divisible by 5. So 5 is going to be another common factor. When I look through the rest of my numbers, I don't see anything else that these numbers have in common. So my common factors are 1 and 5. Now, how would I answer this question? I want to know how many plants can Bella plant in each row. My common factors help me answer this question. My common factors would tell me that Bella can plant 1 or 5 plants in each row in order to have an equal number of plants in each row. Okay? All right, that'll do it for our lesson on common factors. Remember to list all of your factors of a number and then figure out what all of your numbers have in common. I'll see you tomorrow when we'll talk about multiples. See you then.